Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Daled. We have a fascinating and very interesting discussion today about Yesh Em Lamikra versus Yesh Em Lamasoret. Yesh Em Lamikra means that we give precedence. Em literally means a mother, but means we give precedence to the Mikra, to the way that we read the Torah, the vocalization. Whereas the other opinion, Yesh Em Lamasoret, says that we give precedent to the consonants. The Masoret means the tradition of how we write a Sefer Torah. The Torah originally had only consonants, just like our Sifrei Torah today, with no vocalization. And so if you just look at the consonants, it would be difficult to know how to read it. So the reading tradition, that's an oral tradition, that this is how the word is pronounced, this is the vocalization, and also part of that is the punctuation, where to put a soft pasuk and all that. So all that is part of an oral tradition, but was not written down until much later, at the end of the period of the Talmud. That's when we have the various systems for writing the Kudot. We don't write it in a Sefer Torah, but in separate manuscripts, like in the Aleppo Codex. That's where we have a tradition of putting dots below the letters. There were other ways of indicating the vocalization, two other ways that were mostly on top of the letters, and those fell out of favor. They're not used anymore. And so the one that we used is from Tiberia. Some of the sages in Tiberia developed the system that we have today of Nikudot and Ta'amim. But in the time of the rabbis, of the Tanaim and Amoraim, they did not have vocalized text. They only have, like the Sifrei Torah that we have today. And therefore, when they're looking at the text, they notice that many words can be pronounced in a way that's different from the way that we are taught to pronounce it. So which one takes precedence? Is it the way that the traditional way of pronouncing it, Yesh Em Lamikra, or can we ignore that and just follow the consonantal text and offer a different possibility of the vocalization and use that as the basis of a halakha? That is the discussion today. And so, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yoseh Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda ben Ro'etz Bet Shammai Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Akiva Kulehu Sevire Lehu Yesh Em Lamikra. Rabbi Yitzchak, son of Yosef, says the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that the following five Tanaim, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Yehuda ben Ro'ez, Bet Shammai, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Akiva, they all say that we follow the vocalization. That's the primary one, and you cannot just decide a halakha based on the consonantal text and revocalizing it in a different way. This implies that other sages, the sages who disagree with these five, would say Yesh Em Lamasoret, that we can rely just on the consonantal text, even against the traditional way of reading it. That's what it sounds like right now. On the second half of the daf, we're going to say, actually, no. Everybody agrees that Yesh Em Lamikra, that the way that we read it, the vocalization, is the most important. Okay, so let's first go through all five, and then we'll see how we can explain the other side of each of these machalokot. Rabbi Hada Amaran, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, that's what we saw already at the end of the previous daf. Let's look at the Pisukim. We were talking about how many judges do you need for a monetary case. The sages said 3. The Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said you need 5. It says the word Ha-Elohim 3 times. The first one we need for its context, so forget that one. And the next one says Ad Ha-Elohim, Yavod Vashanehem. And then the third one is Asher Yarshi'on Elohim. So how many is that? Well, the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, look at this word, Yarshi'on. That the way we read it is in plural. Yarshi'on, that's plural. So that would mean that the word Elohim is also a plural, because it makes sense that they have to agree. And so if this Elohim is plural, that's referring to 2 judges. And this word Elohim then also makes sense that it would be the same thing as this one. And so that's referring to another 2 judges. So that's 4 judges altogether. And you can't have an even number. So you'll have to add 1 and then you get 5. That was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. The Rabbanan said, wait a second, there's no Vav here, right? It's written without a Vav, it's written Chaser. So you could read it Yarshi'an. And so without a Vav, it's not clear that it's a plural. The truth is, it would have to be Yarshia. So the nun by itself kind of makes it a plural. But the point is that if it was to make it clear that it's a plural, it should have a Vav. and it doesn't have a vav. So therefore, if we follow just the consonantal text, then we can understand this as a singular. And in that case, according to the Banan, Elohim is a singular. That's one. This Elohim is two, and you can't have an even number. So we're going to add one, and that makes three. So that would be the difference between the two opinions. That's what we saw at the end of the daf yesterday. Okay, so there you go. There you go. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says we follow the vocalization. ורבי יהודה בן רועץ דתניא, שאלו תלמידים את רבי יהודה בן רועץ, אקרא אני 70, יכול תהא יולדת נקבה טמאה 70. So the students of Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz, they asked their teacher a question regarding a yoledet. A woman who gives birth is tameh for a certain amount of time and then tahod for a certain amount of time. So the Torah is very clear regarding if she has a boy, then she's tameh for 7 days, and then tahod for 33 days. Right? She's tameh 7 days, no matter what. And then after that, the next 33 days after, even if she sees blood, that is called dam tohar. And there's no problem. She's tahod. She goes to the mikveh after 7 days, and then she is tahod for all things, except that she can't come to the Bet HaMikdash or eat korbanot until after 40. After the 40th day, then she brings a korban, and then she's 100% and can even eat korbanot. So for a male, it's clear that tameh period is 7 days, and then tahor period is 33 days. Now, what about for a female, for a girl? If a woman gives birth to a girl, then a simple reading of the Torah, according to the way it's vocalized, is that she is tameh for shivu'ayim, for 2 weeks, 14 days, and then for 66 days after that, she is tahor. So it's double that of a boy. If she has a boy, it's 7 and 33. For a girl, it's 14 and 66. Now, here's the thing. The Torah writes shivu'ayim chaser. It doesn't have a vav between the bet and the ayin. And so the students are looking at the Sefer Torah and they're saying, well, this is the same letters as shiv'im. So maybe we should read it as shiv'im. And that would mean that a newborn mother who gives birth to a girl perhaps is tameh for 70 days, because how can you tell? So should we give precedence to the way it's written? Ma'alehen timeh v'tiher b'zachar v'timeh v'tiher b'nekeba. Ma keshet tiher b'zachar b'nekeba kiflayim, af keshet timeh b'zachar b'nekeba kiflayim. Rabbi Yehuda ben Roeh says, no, you cannot read it that way. Why? Because I'm going to show you the analogy to the boy. There is a tameh period and a tahor period for the boy. And there's also an impure period and a pure period if she gives birth to a girl. And they're in the same ratio. Just like regarding the pure ratio, the pure period for a boy, we compare that with the girl. The girl is double that for a boy. For a boy, it's 33 days. If she gives birth to a girl, then her dam tohar period is 66 days. So therefore, we see that with the ratio it has to be. And we're going to apply that also for the Tum'ah period, just like the Tum'ah period is 7 days, so Nekeva is going to be double that, because we learned the ratio from the Tahor days, so also for the Tameh days, it's going to be double that of a boy, which is 14. So that's how you know it can't be 70. It wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't fit the ratio. And so that is a satisfactory answer, and the students were very happy, and they left. Then, לאחר שיצאו יסע ומחזיר אחריהם. אמר להן, אי אתם זקוקים לכך, שבועיים קרנן ויש אם למקרא. After the students left, Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz, their teacher, went to look for them and said, hold on, I want to change my answer. You don't even need the answer. It's true what I told you. It is a fine answer, but actually I have a better one, and that is that the way we read it, the vocalization is shivu'ayim, is 2 weeks, and we give the precedence to the way that we read it. So it's very important for the Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz, for the students to know this rule, because there might be other cases where you wouldn't be able to tell from the context or a ratio or an analogy, and you'd have to know that we follow the vocalization. So he wants to tell them, listen, you can't just go around looking at the consonantal text and saying, well, I can read it this way and follow some halakha according to the way you decide to read it. No, there is precedence to the way that we vocalize it traditionally. And so it's clear that Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz says Yeshem la mikra. All right, so that was the second case. Third case, Bet Shammai ditnan. Bet Shammai omrim kol nitanin al mizbeach hachison shenetanan b'matana achat kiper sheneemar v'dam zebechecha yishafech u'bachatat shete matanot. Bet Shammai says, this is a Mishnah in Masechet Zevachim, that any blood, generally the main part of a sacrifice is the blood that is placed on the Mizbeach, but it's placed in different places and different number depending on the details of the sacrifice. So, regarding all those placements of blood that are placed on the outer altar, there's two Mizbachot. There's the outer one that's outdoors, where most of the korbanot go, and then there's also the inner one inside the Kodesh, which is Mizbach HaKetoret, and there's a few korbanot that are offered in the inner one, as we'll see. But almost all of them are, the blood is sprinkled on the outer one. So focusing on the outer Mizbeach, how many times do you have to put the blood on the Mizbeach? So, if you put it one time, then you already get atonement for most of them. As the Pasuk says, Dam zebachecha yishafech. Dam, just the one blood of your offerings shall be poured on the altar. However, for a chatat offering, it has to be, you need two placements. So that says the absolute minimum in order to get atonement is that it has to be put on two different places on the Mizbeach. However, Bet Hillel omrim af bechata shenetana b'matana achat kiper. Bet Hillel says there's no difference between most of the korbanot and a chatat. Even for a korban chatat, even if the kohen only puts it in one spot on the Mizbeach, that is a ton. But the avad, there should be more, but the absolute minimum in order to get kapara is one. If the kohen doesn't, if he slaughters the animal and all that, but doesn't put the blood on the Mizbeach at all, then it's no good, and you're going to have to bring another one. Now, what's the source? Amar Rav Huna. My tama de Bet Shammai. Karnot, hare kan shesh. Arba lemitzvah, ushtayim le'akev. Rav Huna says we learn it from the thrice repetition of the word karnot. Now, it's written without a vav, but you see, Bet Shammai says we're going to follow the vocalization, yeshem lamikra, and we read it karnot plural. So karnot, each one is two, and it says the word three times. That's six altogether. Now, there's only four corners of the Mizbeach. You're putting it on the corners, but there's only four corners. So what do you mean six? So therefore, it can't mean six corners, obviously. So that means we're going to split it. 4 is for lecha techila. Do you want to do the mitzvah in the best way? Then put the blood for a chatat on all four corners. That takes care of 4 of them. Why is there another 2? 2 is b'di avad. That has to be at least 2. Unless if you only put it on 1, it's no good. That's how Bet Shammai learns it. Let's look at the Pisukim inside so we see what we're talking about. This is in Vayikra Perek Daled. It actually says the word karnot in this Perek 4 times, not just 3 times. But the first one is talking about a korban that is brought by the Kohen. If a Kohen Gadol makes a sin, then he brings it on the Mizbach HaKetoret, the inner one. So we're not talking about this because this goes on the inner Mizbeach, and we're only talking about sacrifices that go on the outer Mizbeach. So that's why we're ignoring that one. So the next paragraph is about a Nasi. If the king makes an error, makes a sin, then he has to bring a Korban Chatat. And it says regarding him, Natan al Karnot Mizbach HaOlah. There you go, Mizbach HaOlah, that's the outer one. So that's the first instance of Karnot. Then if a regular person sins, and he decides he's going to bring a goat. So then it also says here, V'natan al karnot mizbach ha'olah. And if a regular person decides that he wants to bring a sheep, that's the next paragraph, and it says, V'natan al karnot mizbach ha'olah. So that's the 3 times that it says karnot, and you see that in our text, in the Masoretic text, that according to the Halakha Codex and the way we have it in our Sifrei Torah, it says karnat. The Halakha Codex is missing these pages, but we can tell that it had karnat. So it says karnat, meaning it's the vocalization is karnot, but it's written chaser, so it could be read as karnat. But so even though it's written without a vav, but the vocalization is in plural, and so Bet Shammai says we follow the vocalization. That's 6 altogether: 4 for the lecha techila, 2 for b'di avad. So the minimum amount for b'di avad is 2. ובית הלל אומרים קרנות, קרנות. הרי כאן 4, 3 למצווה והאחת לעקה. Bet Hillel says one of them is written with a vav. So in the text of of Bet Hillel, or in time of the Talmud, they actually had a vav, even though we don't have that in our Sifrei Torah. There are a bunch of cases like this where regarding Maleh and Chaser, there are some discrepancies. Okay, anyway, so Bet Hillel had a vav in one of them, so that one is for sure 2. That counts as 2, because that's plural. But the other ones, even though we vocalize it karnot, it's written karnat, which can be read, which is a singular. And so that is only adding one more, and the other karnat is one more, so that's 4 altogether. So why do you need 4? If you're going to say all 4 is for the mitzvah lecha techila, that would mean that how about b'di'avad? 0 is okay, b'di'avad? That can't be. You can't have 0. So therefore he reads it as 3 for the mitzvah, lechet techila. Do it the best way, put it on 3 corners. And what if you didn't? B'di'avad, the one left over is for b'di'avad, has to be at least on 1 corner. We ask, maybe all 4 are for the lechet techila? Can't be. Kapara bichdi la'ashkachan. That would mean for that b'di'avad, you can have even 0, but you can't get kapara for doing nothing, right? You have to do some ritual in order to attain atonement, and so therefore it's 3 and 1. What do we see from here? Bottom line is that Bet Shammai is saying Yeshem Lamikra. We follow the way it's read, and it's read plural all 3 times. That's 6, and take away 4 for the lechatechila. That leaves 2 b'di'avad. That's why he says you need at least 2 for a chatat. Bet Hillel says that we follow the way, not the way it's read, but the way it's written. And that's how he gets 3 and 1. So you only need 1 b'di'avad. Okay, next Tana is Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya, shetam kilchatan ushlishit afilu tefach. Rabbi Shimon omer shalosh kilchatan urbi'it afilu tefach. Regarding a sukkah, how many walls do you need for a minimum for a sukkah? The Baraita says you need 2 full walls, and the third wall can be very partial, even if it's just 1 tefach long. That's a fist, length of a fist, about 3.5 inches or so. That's all you need. Whereas that's Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon says, no, you need 3 full walls, and the 4th one can be just a partial wall, just a tefach. What's at the essence of their machloket? Rabbanan sabre yeshem lamasodet. Rabbi Shimon sabar yeshem lamikra. So it depends on how you look at the word sukkot that's written in the Torah. Rabbanan are going to follow the masoret, the consonantal text, and Rabbi Shimon is going to follow the vocalization. Rabbanan sabre yeshem lamasodet. Basukot. Let's look at the Pesukim inside, and we'll see that it says here, Basukot teshevu shivat yamim. So that's 1, and it's written chaser. So you could read it besukat. And then the end of that pasuk says Yeshu basukot. That's the second instance, and the third one Meidu dotchem ki basukot. So you see that in our text with chaser, and the next one is written maleh with a vav. So let's see. Rabbanan say we're going to follow the masoret, meaning the consonantal text, and it says basukat, besukat, basukot. Good. In this case, they have the same letters as we have in our text. And you get altogether 4, because singular, plural, that makes 1 plus 1 plus 2 is 4 walls altogether. Dal chad kera legufe pashu lehu telat. And then if you take, you can't use all 4 because you need 1 for its own context, right? You need 1 to just know that you have to sit in the sukkah. So you ignore 1 of them, and then you have just 3. And and then the Halakha M'Shem Sinai comes and tells us, listen, I know you need 3 walls, but the third one doesn't have to be full. It can be just a very small wall of 1 tefach. So that's Rabbanan. They have 4 altogether. 1 for its context, you get 3. And of those 3, Halakha M'Shem Sinai says that 1 of them can be a short wall. V'Rabbi Shimon Sabar. Basukot, 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 hare kan shesh. Rabbi Shimon is following the vocalization, and they are written in. We read them in plural, and therefore it's 2, 4, 6. So there's 6 walls altogether. Dal chad kira legufeh. Now, one of these words we cannot use because we need it for the context. So you're not just taking away one of the 6; you're taking away one of the words. And each word is 2. So now, pashu lehu arba. So once we take away one of the words, then we end up with 4. Atai hilcheta gera'ata lerebi'it. And then we have 4 walls that you need all together. Halakha l'Moshe Sinai says the 4th wall can be partial. Ve'okmeh atefach, and they made it only 1 tefach, and that's how Rabbi Shimon says. Why Rabbi Shimon says you need 3 full walls, and then the last one can be a tefach. So we see what's at the essence of their machloket. Rabbi Shimon says that we follow the vocalization, and that's how you got. You can't use all 3 words. Use 2 of the words, and you get sukkot. Sukkot, that's 4 walls. So you need 4 walls. One of them can be short, but you do need 4 walls. Whereas Rabbanan says that one, you take away 1 word, and the other 3 words you have 1 singular, 1 plural. That's 3. So you only need 3 walls altogether, of which 1 can be short. Rabbi Akiva detanya. Rabbi Akiva omer, minayin lerbi'it dam sheyatz'a mishne metim shemetame be'ohel shenemar al kol nafshot met lo yavo. And so the last of the series, the 5th Tana, is Rabbi Akiva, and he says that everybody agrees that in order for blood to cause tum'ah in a tent, you need at least a revi'it of blood from a dead body. A full dead body certainly makes, if it's in a room or a tent, it spreads, and everything else that's in that tent, in that enclosure, is tameh. But what about if it's not a full body? What if about just parts? What if it's a skull? What if it's bones? There's all different measurements, and so these measurements are more than for touching. For touching a piece of a dead body, even a small piece of a bone would make someone tameh by touching. But in order to spread throughout a tent, it has to be more. So how much for blood, liquid blood, how much is the minimum? A revi'it. Everybody agrees it's a revi'it of blood that will, if it's from one body, from one corpse, then that will spread. But what about if it's from 2 corpses, as a half a revi'it from one corpse and a half a revi'it from the other corpse? Can they join together? Rabbi Akiva says yes, they can join together. So he says, how do I know that a revi'it dam, even though it comes from 2 different dead bodies, it will spread tum'ah in a tent? As the pasuk says, al kol nafshot met lo yavo. The word nafshot is written without a vav, so it could be, if you have only the consonants, it could read nafshat, of just 1 nefesh. Nefesh, it refers to a person, a body. It also refers to the blood, because ki adam hu hanafesh, the blood is the essence of a person's life. So because it's written, even though it's written without a vav, but Rabbi Akiva says we look at the way it's vocalized, and it's vocalized as a plural. So nafshot means 2 people, and therefore, even if the blood comes from 2 people, it will cause tum'ah. Shete nefashot v'shi'or echad. It could be from 2 different people, 2 different bodies. As long as it adds up to 1 measurement, it will cause tent impurity. V'Rabbanan nafshat ketib. Rabbanan says it's written without a vav, and so they read it as just 1 person. And all the blood, you need an entire revi'it from 1 person in order to cause tent impurity. Okay, so we went through all 5, and we showed how these 5 sages think that yesh em lamikra, but that implies that those who disagree with them, on the other side, say yesh em lamasoret. Like in the last case, Rabbanan say nafshat. So they're following only the consonantal text. And now we challenge this. Matkif ladav acha bar Yaakov. Is it true that there are some sages that do not follow precedence of the way it's written, the vocalization? The vocalization is really important, right? If a Chazan gets up and he reads the Torah wrong, different vocalization, even if it fits the letters, we make him go back. It's no good. So is there any Tana that says that we don't follow em lamikra v'hatanya b'halev imo. And here's a proof that everybody will agree that you have to follow the vocalization. When it says lo tevashel gedi b'halev imo, so the way we read it, right? Don't cook goat, and halev imo, that's halav. Halav and halev is the same thing. Halav is when it's an independent noun, and when you're attaching it to another word, it's halev imo. Just like bait is independent, and it's when it's bismichut, when you attach it to a next noun, like bet, sefer, bet knesset, house of, then the vocalization changes. But the vocalization says milk. All right, chalev imo means the milk of its mother. And from here we learn that you're not allowed to cook meat and milk. Now, if it didn't have vowels, you could read it chalev imo. Yachol be chalev Amat yeshem lamikra. Chelev means fat, forbidden fat. And according to that, that would mean that you're not allowed to cook a goat in the fat of the mother. And so that would mean that you just can't cook goat in fat. But how about milk? Then that would be okay, right? Does anybody think that? No, you cannot say that because we have to follow the vocalization. So we see, and everybody going to agree with, you think anyone's going to say? You think any of the rabbis who disagree with the five that we just saw, are they going to say, yeah, you can eat meat and milk, only the problem is meat and fat is the problem? No, obviously not. Everybody agrees that meat and milk is the problem because we follow the vocalization. Rather, it has to be that all sages think that you have to follow, you have to give precedence to the vocalization. Now we're going to go through all five again and show that the other side of the machloket also thinks that we follow the vocalization, and we're going to explain their source in a different way than we assumed before. So, Rabbi and Rabbanan, they're actually arguing on something else. Rabbi sabar yarshi'un Elohim acharine. Rabbi says that when it says yarshi'un Elohim, this is referring to two judges other than the one that it is referred to in the first instance of Elohim. Whereas Rabbanan think that yarshi'un, although it's plural, is talking about both instances of the word Elohim. In other words, according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he would say, Yarshion is plural. Good. So that's Yarshion Elohim. These two, this word Elohim is referring to two judges, and that's besides the two judges that are over here in the first half of the pasuk. So that's 2 plus 2 is 4. Whereas Rabbanan, they are also reading the vocalized text. Yarshiun is plural. But when it says Yarshiun, that's referring to they, the two judges. Which two judges? Well, here it is. Here's one, and here's another. So the word Elohim actually is still singular, and the plural is referring to both of these judges here. So that's only two judges altogether. Both would say it's an even number, so we have to add one, and that's how Rabbanan get 2, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi gets 3. But in fact, everybody agrees that we follow the vocalization. Next, Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz, la peligi Rabbanan ale. Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz, he said that regarding a woman who gives birth, for a boy, it's 7 and 33. For a girl, it's 14 and 66. And you have to read it shivu'ayim and not shiv'im, so you follow the vocalization. In fact, there is no disagreement there. It was just his students were asking a question. It was a good question. The students were looking and said, look, you can read it shiv'im. He proved to them, not so. And they said, okay, we accept. There is no Baal HaMachloket. There's nobody who disagrees. So there's no problem there. Everyone agrees that you follow the vocalization. Bet Hillel de Tanya. V'chiper mipnei hadin. Bet Hillel said that a chatat offering for the ones that are sprinkled outside, let's say for a regular person who sins, is sprinkled outside. He says that b'di avad, you need just one. Bet Shammai says you need at least 2 corners to be sprinkled on. Bet Hillel said just one. We thought that he was deriving this from the repetition of karnot, and it says karnot once with maleh and twice chaser. That's 4 altogether. So he said, oh, that's 3 for l'chatechila, 1 b'di avad. But that that is following the consonantal text. But now let's try to explain Bet Hillel in a different way altogether, that he could derive the same law regarding the B'diavad. In this reading, Lechatechila, he'll say 4, but B'diavad is only 1. How can he derive that following the text as read, the Yeshem Lamikra? Okay, so we're going to use a different word, not kanot, but rather vechiper. So it says the word vechiper 3 times. So let's look again here. And again, we're focusing only not on the first 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph is of a Kohen sins, and then it says Im kol adat Yisrael. If the Sanhedrin makes a sin, they bring a korban chatat. But those are brought on the inside altar, and it says v'chiper. Okay, but we're not counting those, because we're only counting the ones that are on the outside altar, and that starts with the nasi. If the king sins, then it says v'chiper, and then it says regarding an individual v'chiper, and again here individual brings a goat, and then individual brings a sheep, it says v'chiper. So it says chiper 3 times. And the question is, why does it need to say it 3 times? Because of the kal vachomer. So we're going to learn an extensive kal vachomer, and we're going to show the kal vachomer is inconclusive. Because the kal vachomer is inconclusive, we need the 3 times that it says kiper, and we're going to see how that teaches us that 1 sprinkling is sufficient b'di'avad. So here's the kal vachomer that we're going to try to bring. V'alo dinhu, ne'emar damim lemata v'ne'emar damim lema'ala. It says blood below this. In the next chapter, it talks about a bird sin offering. And a bird sin offering, you only have to sprinkle it once. That's it. That's the lichatechila, just 1 corner. Ma damim amurim lemata shenetanan b'matana achat kiper. Af damim amurad lema'ala shenetanan b'matana achat kiper. So I might make a gezerah shava. It says the word blood over here below with regarding the a bird. And if you just do it once, that's sufficient. So too, the blood offering that it says over here regarding the animals, if you just do it once, it's sufficient. So maybe I could learn this analogy from the korban chatat here, where that's an animal, with the korban chatat later, that's a bird, and then I would derive that all you need is 1 sprinkling. So is that the best analogy? Or kelach lederech zo, nemar damim bachutz v'nemar damim bifnim. Instead of making the analogy with the next paragraph, let's make the analogy with what comes in the beginning of this chapter. In the beginning of this chapter is talking about dam bifnim. So it says you have to sprinkle blood on the outside altar. And there are cases when you have to sprinkle blood on the inside altar. That's if the Kohen Gadol or if the Sanhedrin, they bring it on the inside altar. The ones that are inside altar, you have to do all 4 corners. And if you didn't do all 4 corners, then it's 0. You did not get any atonement. So maybe that's the best analogy, and we'll learn aftamim hamurim bachutz chiser achat matanot lo asa velo kilum. So too, the korban chatat of a regular person, if he has to be all 4, and if you're missing 1, even if you did 3, then it's considered nothing. And so now we have an analogy this way and an analogy that way. So if you're just comparing the wording that you have to sprinkle blood, then you won't be able to tell because they're equal analogies. So let's look at the content, right? Conceptually, in the content, to which is it more similar? Danin chutz mechutz ven danin chutz mifnim. You can make an argument that we should compare the 2 sacrifices that are done on the outside altar. So that will be our context of a regular korban chatat and the korban chatat of a bird. And we should not compare it to the korban that's done on the inner altar. Inner altar is a different story altogether. There you need 4, but here you need only 1. Or kelach lederech zob. Or we can make a different argument and say danin chatat v'arba keranot mechatat v'arba keranot. Maybe we should compare the 2 korban chatats where lechatechila you're supposed to do 4, and that would be the prior cases of the Kohen Gadol and the Sanhedrin. You have to do 4, and in this korban of a regular person, you're supposed to do all 4. So those are more similar, and we should compare those and say and teach that 4 is absolutely necessary, and not compare the bird where even the chetechila, you only need to do 1. So you see that the comparison with what comes above and what comes before is inconclusive, and so we don't know regarding a regular korban chatat if the minimum is 4 or the minimum is 1. So therefore, we need another way to derive it. Tamud omar v'chiper 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 mipnei hadin. That's why it says kiped 3 times, because the kavachomer cannot, not kavachomer, it's really a gezerah shava or hekesh. We're comparing 2 paragraphs that are right near each other. And so the logic of it, we cannot derive from, because the logic is equally comparable. So kiped afapi shelo natan ela shelosha. Kiped afapi shelo natan ela shetayim. Kiped afapi shelo natan ela achat. So rather, we start with an assumption that you need 4 corners, and then each word of kiped comes to say, we're going to give you extra atonement, we're going to give you 1 freebie. And so the first time it says kiped, it says, really you need 4. But the word kiped says, you know what, we can bump it down to 3. The next word kiped says, we can bump it down to 2. And the last one says, even if b'di'avad, you only did 1 corner, that's sufficient for these korbanot. For the korbanot inside, you need all 4. But for the korbanot that are done outside, if you did only 1, then that's sufficient. And that's actually the derivation of Bet Hillel. And so you see, Bet Hillel is not learning from the keranot, he's learning from the word kiped. And the word kiped, that's how the way we read it, is the same way it's written. And so that Bet Hillel can derive the same law, assuming yesh em la mikra. Next case, Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan b'ha pilige. Rabbi Shimon sabar sechacha la ba'ekera. Rabbanan sabre sechacha ba'ekera. Regarding how many walls do you need for a sukkah? So we said, it says sukkot, sukkat, sukkat. So that's plural, singular, singular. And where if you read it according to the way it's written, you get 4, you take away 1. But Rabbi Shimon says you have to follow the vocalization. The vocalization says sukkot, sukkot, sukkot. All 3 are plural. So let's follow that. Well, everybody agrees you have to take away 1 of the words because you need it for its context. So you're left with sukkot, sukkot. That's the 2 plus 2 equals 4. So everybody says that there are 4 instances of Sukkot. The question is, do we need 1 of those 4 to tell us that you need a roof? According to the Rabbi Shimon, the roof, you don't need a pasuk to tell you need a roof. Obviously you need a roof. And so he says all 4 are referring to walls and teaches us that you need 4 walls. The 4th one can be a minimum wall, but you need 4 walls. Whereas Rabbanan say, I know, it says Sukkot, Sukkot, I agree. Yesh em la mikra. And we're going to follow them as plurals. So there's 4 things that you need, but 1 of them I need for the roof. And then 3 are left for the walls. And that's how you learn that you need just 3 walls, of which 1 of them can be a partial wall. So you see, we can explain this machloket also in a way that everybody agrees, yesh em la mikra. And lastly, Rabbi Akiba v'Rabbanan b'ha pelige. Rabbi Akiba sabar nafshot tarte mashma. V'Rabbanan sabre nafshot te'alma mashma. And regarding how much can you get the blood from 2 corpses to make up a revi'it, to make 10th impurity, Rabbi Akiba says we follow the way it's read, nafshot. That refers to 2 bodies. So even if the blood comes from 2 bodies, it adds up together to cause 10th impurity. Rabbanan also read it as a plural, nafshot, but he says it's not referring to 2 bodies that combine together in one case, but rather it's talking about many bodies in many cases in general. Whenever you have a corpse, but there's going to be many cases, and right, and all the time it'll come up that there's a one here, one next year, one in a different city, but each one is referring to just 1 corpse. So in order to cause 10th impurity, you need a whole revi'it from 1 corpse, and that will apply to, in general, all the cases that will ever come up. So you see that Rabbanan also is also reading it according to the vocalization of nafshot. So we see that in fact everybody agrees that yesh em la mikra. But now we challenge this conclusion. Udekule alma yesh em la mikra. We just proved that all of these sages and the people that have a machloket with them, we can explain all of their opinions by saying yesh em la mikra. But is that true that every sage says yesh em la mikra, that we follow the vocalization? V'hatanya, Letotafot, letotafot, letotafot. Hare kan arba. Dibre Rabbi Ishmael. The question is, how many sections do you put in the tefillin? We have 4 sections. This is a tefillin shel rosh. We have 4 parchments that are put in 4 separate sections, different from the yad, where they're put all into one section. But it's still 4 paragraphs. So either way, we're putting 4 paragraphs, and let's focus on the rosh, where it's actually 4 separate sections. How do you know it's 4 sections? So Rabbi Ishmael says, well, it says the word totafot 3 times. Once in Sefer Shemot, once in the paragraph of Shema, and another again in the paragraph of Vayam Shamoa. The last 2 are in Sefer Devarim. But in 2 of them, it says totafat and totafat, meaning without a vav. And even though we read them all, they're all vocalized as a plural, the first 2 are written chaser. So totafat would be 1. Totafat would be 1. And the third one does have a vav, according to the Gemara. In our Sifrei Torah, they're all written chaser. But again here, this is actually a fascinating machloket between the Ran and the Rashba. What should we do if our Sifrei Torah are in disagreement with what the Gemara says? Ran says that you should actually correct the Torah to follow the Gemara, which is really wild. Rashba says, no, you keep our traditional text of the Torah the same. There's a discrepancy. Okay, deal with the discrepancy, but doesn't mean that you can go and change the Torah. The Torah tradition has its own basis. So that is an amazing machloket, and Halakha follows Rashba. We do not go and change the Sefer Torah just because the Gemara reports that this Tana had it with a vav. Okay, in any case, Rabbi Ishmael has chaser maleh, so that's 1 plus 1 plus 2, that makes 4. That's how you know there's 4 sections. Rabbi Akiva Omer eno sarich tat bechatvi shetayim, pat bafriki shetayim. Rabbi Akiva says, I don't need to learn it that way. It's too complicated. I can learn it from the word itself, because the word tat in some language called katfi means 2, and pat in some African language also means 2. So the word itself means 2. And so that's how you know it's 4, just from the word by itself. Anyway, we see here that Rabbi Ishmael clearly is following Yeshem Lam Masoret, and that's because that's how he gets 4. If he would follow Yeshem Lam Mikra, then you'd have to put 6 sections inside the tefillin. Ela le'olam pelige. Rather, in fact, there is a machloket. There are Tanaim that say this way and that way. However, the machloket is limited only to cases where there is a difference between the vocalization and the consonants, meaning, like in this case of totafot, where if you would read it as with a vav, then that would be plural, whereas if you read it without a vav, then it can be read as a singular. So where the 2 readings, right, can be pronounced totafat or totafot, where the 2 readings would make a difference in spelling, because totafat would normally be spelled, has to be spelled without a vav, and totafot, the normal way to spell it, would be with a vav. In fact, it's not really a normal way to spell it. The same words, in fact, can be spelled in different ways, and it mostly depends on the time period. Like the word David in Sefer Shemuel and Melachim, which are written earlier, are written Dalid Vav Dalid, no Yod. If you look in Divrei Amim, almost always it's Dalid Vav Yod Dalid. So it's really the same. It's obviously the same person, the same word. But spelt maleh, later scribes would tend to add ehevi, vowel letters, aleph, he, vav, and yud, to make it easier to read. So in any case, if there's a difference in spelling, that the 2 pronunciations would be indicated by no vav and here with a vav, or whatever, no yud or with a yud. If the 2 vocalizations have different spellings, then there is a machloket. Should we follow the Em La Masoret and Em La Mikra? And that would explain this case here of Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva, because there is a difference in spelling. However, when it comes to two different possible vocalizations that the spelling would stay the same, like chet lamed bet. If you read it halev, meaning milk, or chelev, meaning fat, there's no other way to spell it. There's no imota kriya, there's no vowel letters that you would add to indicate one or the other. So since in this case there's no way to tell, there would be no possible way for it to write it with extra letters to indicate one or the other, in that case everybody agrees that you have to follow the mikra, the way it's vocalized. The idea is that when it's written like chaser, like totafot, it can be read in both ways. And so therefore, you can say, well, maybe I should follow the way it's vocalized. Or, why is the Torah writing it chaser? Well, maybe we can learn something from that as well. So there's some ambiguity, and there's going to be a machloket. But where it says chaleb and chelev, where the Torah, there's nothing the Torah could have done to tell you that it means milk and not fat. And the consonantal text could not have indicated it. And therefore, in this case, everybody would agree that yeshem la mikra. And so that explains that what we said before when we brought this example. Yes, everyone does agree that yeshem la mikra when the spelling is necessarily the same. But there is a machloket when the spelling can be different. Hold on, we have a machloket uplige where with regard to the vocalization of this word that is yir'eh or yera'eh, and there's no other way to spell this word. You can't add any imota kriya, and it can mean to see or be seen. Now let's see the machloket de Tanya. Yochanan ben Dahavai omer mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben tema hasoma be'achat me'anav patur min ha'ri'iyah shene'emar yir'eh yera'eh kederech sheba lir'ot kach ba lera'ot ma lir'ot b'shtei einav af lera'ot b'shtei einav. Braita teaches that Yochanan ben Dabai said in the name of Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, if someone is blind in one eye, they don't have to bring the korban when appearing to the Bet HaMikdash. Normally, when one comes to the Bet HaMikdash for a chag, in addition to other obligations, they have to bring a korban re'iyah, a special korban for being seen in the Bet HaMikdash. Now this comes from a pasuk that says, Shalosh pa'amim b'shana yera'eh kol zechurecha. The way that it's read is yera'eh. All of your males shall be seen before God. But it can be read yir'eh. So is it yir'eh or yera'eh? It's ambiguous. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema says, we're actually going to learn it both ways. We're going to take both into account. And the same way that you come to see, you also come to be seen. In fact, many people think that the peshat of the pasuk is, in fact, yir'eh. You should come and see the face of Hashem. But it's not nice to say it in that way, because you can't see in the face of Hashem. It's impossible. Hashem can't be seen. And so yera'eh, so we vocalize it, yera'eh shall be seen. But that meaning of shall see also has relevance. So it means just like if a person comes to see, so too they will be seen. And just like if in order for someone to see fully and properly would be with two eyes, so too to be seen is only with two eyes, meaning that someone that has only one eye has no obligation to be seen because he can't see. Since he can't see fully, then he has no obligation to be seen either. And that's how we learn that someone who has a sight in only one eye does not need to bring a korban re'iyah. So we see from here that this is a word that is in fact has only one spelling, only one possible spelling, and yet Yehuda ben Tema is learning both from the way it's written and also from the way it's read. According to the rule you just said, like chaleb and chaleb, we should only learn from the vocalization. But he's taking into account also the masoret, the consonantal letters. Ela amar Rav Acha bered Rav Ika amar kera lo tevashel gedi derech bishul asra Torah. So rather we reject that premise. And in fact, even when there's only one way to spell it, even then you can give precedence to the way it's vocalized or the way it's written, and you can vocalize it in a different way. And so theoretically, you could say maybe it's chalev, maybe it's chelev. But the reason, if you just followed em lamikra or em lamasoret, but the reason why, in fact, everybody agrees that it's milk and meat and not fat and meat is because the pasuk says, lo tevashel gedi, lo tevashel, don't cook. It means in the way that normal people cook. It's normal to cook meat in a liquid, to boil it. And milk is a liquid. And this actually was commonly done, especially around festivals back in pagan times, because if you have a lot of, if you have a mother animals, they give birth to a lot of babies, and generally, and after that, they would suckle the babies. Now, if you're killing a lot of small animals, those offspring, then the mother's going to have a lot of extra milk. What are you going to do with that extra milk? Well, that would be convenient. Cook those offspring in the milk of the mother, because this was a common thing to do. That's precise, and it was done in pagan context. That's precisely one of the reasons, anyway, why the Torah prohibits it, and why lo tavashel gedi bechalev imo is actually mentioned with regard to holidays. So there's a lot of significance here. Anyway, the normal way to cook is in a liquid, so milk is a liquid. So that's why it's saying, it makes sense that it's saying don't cook in milk, but to cook in fat, that's not a normal way to cook. In fact, it actually wouldn't make sense to prohibit, because chelev is forbidden fat, which is forbidden anyway. So then why would you have to say that you can't cook it in something that's already forbidden? And therefore, just based on the context of cooking, it makes sense it's talking about milk, which is the normal way of cooking, and it's not talking about fat. So that's how we know it's definitely talking about milk and not fat. But theoretically, and in other similar cases, there are opinions among the Tanaim that say yesh em lamasoret, that you can follow the consonantal text even when there's no other way to spell the word. Still, the consonantal text has its own significance according to many Tanaim, independent of the tradition of vocalization. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.